During the Second World War, Winston Churchill was always, quite often at a loss to be able to explain the actions of the Russians. He seemed always to have some kind of a grasp on what the Germans, the Nazis, were doing, and he did a pretty good job of figuring out before they figured out what they were doing. But the Russians always seemed to have him in some confused state. One day, in a moment of frustration, he referred to their actions as saying, "It's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma." Now, if that's not a complicated relationship, I don't know, between allies in particular. But that kind of phrase caught my attention as I began to think about our lives as people and as Christians. Who of us is not somewhere along the way confused with the mysteries of life that go on all around us? The mystery of life, the mystery of death, the mystery of our Christian living. It's a mystery, and it's a riddle, and sometimes it's an enigma that comes upon us. Even the world in which we live is kind of a mysterious place. Look at the mysterious relationship that the moon has with the sea, and how the moon, located thousands of miles away, has that ability to draw the tides back and forth. Look at the strange arrangement of the stars. And if I remember, John, of our short little lesson, that the stars in the winter sky are different than the stars in the summer sky, or their arrangement or whatever. You know, that's kind of weird. It's strange, mysterious. I heard an interesting illustration the other day about the invisible world that is all around us, and we really don't get to enjoy it unless we have the use of a microscope. The man was talking about an electron and how small and minute an electron is. And his illustration went something like this. If you were to enlarge an electron to the size of an apple, and then to enlarge a human being the same proportion as that enlargement, you would have a person that would be large enough to hold the entire universe or the solar system in the palm of their hand, and he would have to have a microscope to see it. Now, that's the invisible world that is all around us. There are a great many mysteries that confront us. Some of the mysteries of life are not nearly as profound, however, such as the mysteries that I think exist in every one of our homes. The mystery called a washing machine. It's a mystery how you could put 12 matched socks in a washing machine and you can only get 8 unmatched socks out. Where do those other 4 go? And how do they change colors like that? See, it's a mystery. The mystery of regardless of what line you get in out at Walmart, it is always the slowest moving line. And if you move from that line to the other, that line becomes the fastest, and now you're stuck behind somebody that's lost their MasterCharge card. You know, it was here a minute ago. It's a mystery. Or the mystery of the peanut butter and jelly bread. You know, the mystery is that it never falls on the kitchen floor, right? It always falls in the living room or in the family room. One man had a great observation. He said it is in direct proportion to the cost of the carpet, whether it falls face down or face up. The more expensive the carpet, the more likely it is to fall face down. There's a host of mysteries that surround us. You know, there are a host of unsolved murder mysteries on the police blotters. There's unsolved diseases that we still can't find remedies for, even though men spend years in research. There's the Loch Ness Monster, the Abominable Snowman, Bigfoot, the Devil's Triangle, UFOs, and on the list goes. And men and women spend years of their life studying and researching, trying to find the answers. But for what? They never come up with an answer. And yet somehow we always seem to manage quite well. We seem to go right on through life knowing good and well that there are a lot of mysteries all around us, and we just take them in stride until God steps into our life. And God gives us a mystery. And then we begin to struggle. I mean, we serve a good God, and He's fair and He's just, and it's not right. He shouldn't traffic in mysteries. I mean, everything ought to be right up front, quite obvious. And if a mystery should last a week or two, or maybe even a year or two, that's not fair. That's not right. And we begin to struggle. Is this God really that good? I mean, is this God in such control of this world as these mysterious things are still under His control? Do I need to believe in this kind of a God? that allows the mysteries to come into my life? Maybe, if anything, we come to the realization that our Bibles, at least my Bible, constantly remind me that God Himself is a mystery. I serve a God who says, I need to be mysterious to you. If you know everything, I'm no longer God. Right? I'm up here. I've created. I've made. I'm your Father, and I've got it all under control. Now, my world tells me something else. It is the cry of the cynic today. You serve that kind of God that allows those things to come into your life? The loss of a mate, the loss of a friend, in the most peculiar of circumstances, all of that suffering and grief and sorrow, and you're going to call that God good and fair and just? How stupid can you get? That's a good God? But yet, still there's the mysteries that even the Word reminds us of. Constantly through God's Word, He has reminded that the mysteries abound on every hand. For example, I made a quick little list. The mysteries of the kingdom, as found in Mark the 4th chapter. The mysteries of Israel in Romans the 11th chapter. The mystery of God's will in Ephesians 1. The mystery of the resurrection, as found in 1 Corinthians the 15th chapter. The mystery of the church, as found in Ephesians 3. The mystery of lawlessness, 2 Thessalonians 2. The mystery of godliness in 1 Timothy 3. The mystery of the gospel in Ephesians 6. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, often those writers will say, and this is a mystery. And then all of the great theologians of our day begin to write piles of books to explain this mystery. When even God Himself said, this is a mystery. I wonder if in fact in our day and in our life, we see that along with all of these mysteries of the Word, then God brings in all of these other little mysteries into our life. Will I always struggle with the things that I struggle with now? Will I always be this way? Will I always have difficulties with my finances or with my marriage or in my home? Will I always have a temperament that I'm so quick to come back? Will I always be like this? See, God's not content just having them on a page. He wants to make them real in our lives. Well, Solomon begins to confront that as we look today in the 8th chapter of Ecclesiastes. He deals with, as he does so many times, the relevant needs of our life. Has it ever impressed you how relevant the Word is? I mean, really, when we begin to sort through the words on the page, and preachers have the tendency, well, the Hebrew phrase there actually means, and the Greek term and the Greek tense, and we begin to deal with the real issues. God says, this pertains to you. This relates to you. These are the mysteries that you deal with and you traffic in every day of your life. Solomon says, I see some mysteries in this world. Now, I'd like for us to go to the last 2 verses of chapter 8. We're kind of going to go to the back of the book and get the answers and then work them. You ever do that in school? In algebra, I had to do that a lot. Go to the back of the book and get the answers, and then, of course, then you had to come up with the equation that came up with that answer. But today, it'll all fit together. If you look at the last 2 verses of chapter 8, he begins to give us a good perspective of the mysteries that abound around us. He says, when I applied my mind to know wisdom and to observe man's labor on earth, his eyes not sleeping, not seeing sleep day or night, then I saw that all that God has done, no one can comprehend what goes on under the sun. Despite all of his efforts to research or to search it out, man cannot discover its meaning. Even if a wise man claims he knows, he cannot really comprehend it. Now, that's a pretty potent statement to say or to be made by the man who was the second wisest man in the world, Christ Himself being the wisest man that ever lived upon this earth. The wisest man in our frame of reference to ever live says, even the most wise, even if he says, well, I know, really can't comprehend it. And so he gives us a perspective about what the mysteries in our life really need. Now, let me suggest to you this morning that if you're going to come to a conclusion about the mysteries in your life, you need to have this perspective. Notice that I say if you come to the conclusion, not that if you come to an answer. Because any of us who have lived any length of time whatsoever have already concluded some things don't have answers. The big questions of why. But we need to come to a conclusion of those mysteries. And so Solomon says, here's some perspectives. Have these so that you might come to a conclusion. The first being that of the fact that mysteries of God defy human explanation. They are just contrary to human explanation. And we study and we know all of the words on the page and all of the Greek tenses and all of the Hebrew phrases. And when we get done, still, the mysteries of God's plan defy human explanation. Why? Why would God love me? Now you say, well, now, God is love. Why would God love me? I mean, on my best day, I really don't deserve that. Try not to look too pious this morning. Neither do you. Right? On our best day, we don't deserve His love. See, the mysteries of God defy human explanation. But secondly, he says, and it's right there in that last phrase, even if a wise man claims he knows, he can't really comprehend it. He says you need to have the perspective that the mysteries of God go beyond human intellect and wisdom. You know, we all sit around and we ponder the deeper things, but when it's all added up, what do we come up with? It's still a mystery. Well, we take wild shots in the dark, and it's still, you know, we try to get some answers, but still it's a mystery. And we need to have that perspective if we will ever come to some of the conclusions in our life of the mysteries that beset us. Now, Solomon says, I've seen some things in my life. They've invaded my life, these mysteries, and we're going to look at them in just a second, and I've had to deal with those things. I wonder how many of us have had to deal with those things. Why did my mother or my dad or my grandma or grandpa have to suffer like they did? Why do these things happen to our family? Why? You ever had a mystery that's invaded? And it's caused you and it's got you to begin to think about, why am I following this God? I believe that Solomon was a man who experienced those same things. And if that's not happened in your life, maybe you need to stay around here just long enough so that you can see. For any of us who have been at Evergreen at any length of time whatsoever, we have seen mysterious things. We really have. We've seen some of the most bullheaded, obnoxious people led by the Lord. You talk about a mystery, and that's the truth. Some of us walked around about half-baked, and still God says, I'm going to take you from point A to point B. Now that's a mystery. Even in spite of the fact that we blow it a lot of times, God says, I'm not done with you yet. Isn't that mysterious? It is to me. So if it's not happening in your life, just get a little closer. You'll see it. It's right here. Probably sitting in the same aisle with you this morning. I'll not name any names, Jack, but a lot of them are right here in this in this room. I suppose all of us have had to deal with some area in our life where we have been somewhat shaken or confused by the mysteries that have beset us. And still God wants us to know that everything is still under His control. Solomon gives us an amazing insight. He says, I've seen some mystery. He begins in verse 10. He says, one of the mysteries that I've seen is the unjust triumph of people. He says in verse 10, then too I saw the wicked buried. That's not an uncommon thing, is it? It happens all the time. The wicked buried. Those who used to come and go from the holy place. And these wicked, they received praise in the very city where they did their wickedness. The wicked buried and then received praise for it. I suppose we have the writer putting his finger on one of the rubs of life. We've all experienced, we've all witnessed this sort of thing before. An evil or wicked individual is buried and he's given an honorable, gracious funeral. After the funeral is done, we all walk away from the cemetery going, well, old Jake wasn't such a bad guy. True, he worked for the mafia and he killed people for a living, but he wasn't really a bad guy. He never kicked dogs, or things like that. Wait a second. Solomon says that there's a mystery to me that we can walk down to the funeral and this is the most wicked person in the world and we leave and the good things that he has done lives on. The bad things that he has done is buried with him and worse yet, quickly forgotten. Now that's a mystery to me how people can do that. I suppose, if anything, Solomon's point is, let's watch what goes on in the lives of people. And it's bewildering at times. How can people ever do such things? Verse 11 is akin to that. When in verse 11 he says, when the sentence for a crime is not quickly carried out, the hearts of the people are filled with schemes to do wrong. Haven't you seen that more times than you can remember? Somebody that you're quite familiar with has done an evil thing, has broken the law, and he's arrested. And you say, well, finally somebody, the law's caught up with him, he's going to get his just rewards, his just deservings, and they'll take care of it, only to have him taken down and booked and then released right back out into society. In fact, you see him a couple of weeks later, and he's even saying, well, look, even if you do wrong and they catch you, what are they going to do about it? So you can do what you want. Solomon says, boy, that's a mystery to me. In fact, it's such a mystery as I watch it, those who have not paid the price for their unjust deeds actually have their hearts turned to more evilness, more wickedness. That's really not out of line with what we see, is it? No. And yet those people seem to go unpunished. Nothing ever seems to happen to those people. Isn't it interesting that a man can cheat and even tell you about it on his income taxes? Well, tell some of us about it, Wayne, You know, he can cheat hundreds and thousands of dollars, and the IRS never seems to catch up with him. You hedge $50, and what do? They audit you. You're caught. Reminds me of the guy who sent a note to the IRS, and you've probably heard this before. He says, I've had a tough time sleeping. I really felt guilty, so I'm sending you a check for $150. If I still can't sleep, I'll send you the rest later, Some things just don't seem fair. I mean, it's unjust what happens. But he goes on with that same thing. Another mystery, he says, if we'll skip down to verse 14, we'll come back to verses 12 and 13 here in just a second, is the mystery of unfair consequences. In verse 14, he says, there's something else meaningless that occurs on earth. Righteous men who get what the wicked deserve, and wicked men who get what the righteous deserve. That doesn't seem fair. The consequences of life don't seem to even out there. One particular translator put it this way: Providence seems to treat some good people as if they're evil, and some evil people as if they're good. An age-old puzzle, isn't it? Why is it that the missionaries are always martyred? Why not the murderers? Huh? Why is it that a good Christian family traveling down the highway, trying to live for the Lord, should have an irresponsible drunk driver cross the line, wipe them out, kill everyone in their car, and he walks away literally without a scratch? Why is it that the mafia can make their millions off of prostitution and drug abuse and porno shops and threats and illegal gambling, and Christian people trying to walk right with God can't make ends meet? It's not right. It's not fair. It's a mystery. It's a riddle. And Solomon says if we'll look around, we see it everywhere. Who of us haven't begun to think about such things? In fact, if you haven't thought about such things, maybe you've been too busy to think straight. You know what I mean? Solomon says, let's look around. Kushner, in his books on why do bad things happen to good people, has an interesting insight to this whole issue. He says, there's only one question that really matters. Why do bad things happen to good people? All other theological conversation is intellectually diverting. Virtually all meaningful conversations I have had with people about God either starts with or gets around to this question before long. The misfortunes of good people are not only a problem to the people who suffer, but to those who want to believe in a just and fair and livable world. Now, he's got a good point there. I pick up the daily paper, and fresh challenges to the idea of the world's goodness assault my eyes. Senseless murders, fatal practical jokes, young people killed in auto accidents on their way to their wedding or coming home from the high school prom. Does God temper the wind to the shorn lamb? Does He never ask more of us than we can endure? I have seen people crack under the strain of unbearable tragedy. I have seen some become noble and sensible through suffering, but I have seen many more grow cynical and bitter. It's a mystery. I'll tell you a mystery that I heard not too long ago. Well, we took my cousin in, and the x-ray showed no tumor. The same x-ray was taken to her doctor back home, and he compared it to the x-ray he had. His x-ray had a tumor. There was one there, but now it's gone. No surgery, just prayer. And we all go, okay, it happens. The mystery now? My brother has a tumor, and we've taken a second x-ray. The tumor is larger now. We'll have to operate. You say, wait, why does it happen there and it doesn't happen all the time? Are those the mysteries of life? Maybe even unfair at times? Solomon says, I've seen those things face to face. And it's not right. In my understanding of things, it's not right. The mysteries of God. He goes on a little bit further. Something that may seem a little bit out of place here. In verse 15, the first part of verse 15, so I commend the enjoyment of life, because nothing is better for a man under the sun than to eat, drink, and be glad. Now we say, well, I've heard that before. That's the Playboy philosophy of our day. Hedonism at its best. Eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we die. Well, maybe there's more to that. If you look at the latter part of verse 15 as he continues, then joy will accompany him in his work all the days of the life God has given him under the sun. Solomon gives us a great perspective to think on. We see God at work. In fact, even the commendation that we have, what is it? The eating, drinking, and the enjoying of life as our space to stand in while all of these mysteries surround us. God says, I give you a space. It's called your life. And it's called an area where you can eat, joy, and enjoy life. And in fact, that's your area to live in. Because all around you, outside of that area, are the mysteries. And that's an area that is safe for you. Enjoy that space. Solomon has, I believe, a great alternative to what we normally see as a response to the mysteries. Because you see, there are two ways that we can respond to the mysteries that beset us. We can become bitter, cynical, questioning, never at peace. In fact, we might even begin to possess a neurotic need for the answers to why. And if you don't believe that, all you need to do is listen to a lot of Christian people, good Christian people, who are constantly asking why. Why did they do that? Why is the church doing that? Always analyzing everything. And Solomon says, oh, wait a second. I've got an alternative to that. My alternative is that you eat, drink, and as he says here, happily, implied, happily trust God to do His work. You've got your space. God's giving you that time. Maybe it's not as long as you think it ought to be. Maybe it's not everything that you wanted it to be. But God's given you this. Don't get outside of your frame of reference. Let God be God. Is that a good point? Wait a second. Is that a good point today? Yeah, let God be God. He knows the mysteries. He knows the riddles. And He's got the answers. Maybe our problem is that we are trying to do His work for Him. Well, how do I do that? I mean, how do I enjoy the space that God has given me? I think he goes right back up to verse 12. Although a wicked man commits 100 crimes and still lives a long time, I know it will go better with God-fearing men who are reverent before God. I challenge you to find any merriment in life apart from that verse. Anywhere. It's not going to happen, is it? It's just not going to happen. Now, Solomon's not denying the reality of sin. In fact, he says even if a man sins 100 times over, even though his life seems to go longer, even with a sinful lifestyle, don't let that throw you off track. He says, what's he say? I know it will go better for God-fearing men. I've heard that phrase somewhere before. Maybe not that way. Who was it? Job, wasn't it? When his wife walked up to him one day and said, look, why don't you just curse God and die? The most sensible thing in the world is just curse God and die. And Job's response? Get out of here. I can't do that. Even if everything is not going as I think it ought to go, I know that the best thing to do is to serve and to live for God. I know the truth of the matter. Solomon goes on a little bit further here in verse 13. He says, yet because the wicked do not fear God, It will not go well with them, and their days will not lengthen like a shadow. He says, put it in the right perspective. I don't see it all. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know all of God's plan, but I believe that God's going to work it out. Because God made a promise right up front. The just shall be rewarded, the wicked shall be punished. Is that something God made quite clear? That's the deal. The just shall be rewarded, the wicked shall be punished. And if God said that, you can put it in the bank. Amen? You can bank on that. Because God doesn't back down. And maybe, if anything, we need to see in light of our scripture reading this morning, there are some things that are more appropriate in their time. If you miss the eternal perspective of your life, you're going to wind up spending your time and your life wringing your hands trying to always figure out why. Or worse yet, spending your time shaking your fist toward heaven saying, why? If you'll look around this room this morning, there have been a lot of people who have come and gone. Some of them spent several years with Evergreen before they came and went. Many of those people left with a frustration. Evergreen, the preacher, the elders, the people weren't doing everything that they were supposed to be doing. Some of those people received more calls than anyone else that has ever been called on through Evergreen Christian Church Ministry. Their problem wasn't with Evergreen, or this preacher, or those elders, or this group of people. You know who their problem was with? God. Always wondering why. Why was my mom in the hospital? Why was my dad struck? And why was this? Why was that? Why nobody cares for me? Why doesn't anyone listen? Why? God says, wait a second. You're way off base. You see, quite often, in fact, it happens quite often, preachers, elders, and deacons get caught in the crossfire between people and God. And I call it just that. A lot of people stomp through that door and they're mad at something this morning. And that's not a true statement. There's nobody that I know this morning that's true. That's just a generalization. But we come in and we snorting stuff and everything else around here. And we're mad at who? And at what? We're mad at God. Life's not going the way that I want it to go. I can't get my checkbook to balance. My work's not going well. My marriage isn't going right. My home's in a mess. It's all God's fault. That's a good one to blame. I believe God's got some pretty broad shoulders. I think He can handle that. I don't have to stand up and say, no, it's not God's fault. I think God can do pretty good on His own, as a matter of fact. But we miss the real point, see. A lot of us are struggling with God and the mysteries, and we're really accusing other people of that. And that's not fair. People often think that because a man or a church leader has been given a responsibility, that God has also given to him all of the answers. That doesn't happen. I'm just here to tell you this morning, it just doesn't happen. And the ability to see through the mysteries and to dispense at times, why don't you give me a miracle, preacher? Why don't you give me a miracle, people of Evergreen? Why don't you just reach in and change my life like that? And when it doesn't happen, we all sit back and say, well, there must be something wrong with the Christian faith. There's nothing wrong with the Christian faith. In a book entitled 5 Smooth Stones for Pastoral Work, Eugene Peterson has a good insight to this whole issue. Now, it's kind of long, and I want to keep it short, but I need you to think with me. It's a long paragraph. All right? Can you adjust your time? Stroke your beard once or twice, Wayne? I can always tell when Wayne's ready to think. Okay, all right, now I'm ready. He writes about this issue here, and he says, pastoral work takes place in a context in which every kind of spiritual expectation is directed to the pastor or church leader. It is also a context in which other answers are being offered by better budgeted competitors. I like that. Skilled in the art of bedazzlement, who elbow their way in and get a hearing. We are jostled by fast talking and fast promising others. We are not the only preachers on the block. If we cannot make good what people want done for them spiritually, there are plenty around who will, or say they will. A cursory sorting out of people's expectations ends up with two piles: miracles and answers. The miracles are an expectation that God will do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. The answers are an expectation that God will tell us what we cannot figure out for ourselves. Are you staying with me? We get to the good part now. Both expectations are plausible. Since God is both omnipotent and omniscient, it would seem to follow. If we get close to Him, some of what He is ought to rub off on us. It is not unreasonable to suppose that His power will rub off in the form of miracles, and His wisdom in the form of answers. At this point, someone was calling to see what the point was. At this point, pastoral work encounters a complex difficulty. For the vocation of a pastor or church leader does not permit trafficking in miracles or answers. Pastors are in the awkward position of refusing to give what a great many people assume is their assigned job to give. We are in the embarrassing position of disappointing people in what they think they have a right to get from us. I love that phrase there. We are asked to pray for an appropriate miracle. We are called upon to declare an authoritative answer, but our calling equips us to do neither. In fact, it forbids us in either the miracle business or the answer business. For that is God's business. Now, he's got a good point. Do you see where I'm going this morning? A lot of us come in and we need the answers to mysteries, and so we go to our preacher. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm ready to help. I'm ready to counsel and pray and sit and think and ponder and study. I'm ready to do that with you. But you're going to the wrong source. For I'm not the source. That wonderful elder that you respect above everyone else is not the source. God is the source. That's the only source. And we wander in and we wander out and we leave a building and we leave a service and we go, boy, something was missing this morning. The preacher wasn't on. The song service wasn't on. No, we weren't on. We weren't on to God. The answers to the issues are not in group meetings, not in congregational meetings or committee meetings. The answers to the issues are found in God. A preschool, another building, another program, they're in God's hands, not our hands. And many of us get tense and uptight. They're going to do what? When the only answer rests in God's hands. God, why does this happen? Preacher, tell me. Why are these people doing this to me? And God's got the answer. I don't. In fact, if anything, I have learned over my years, just when you think you got the answers, you're only fooling yourself. Well, so what's the conclusion of all this? That was introduction. Within the next 2 minutes, we get the sermon. Every sermon's got to have 3 points. This one doesn't, but we're going to make 3 points out of this. Some admissions, I believe, are appropriate for us to deal with the mysteries that surround us and how to